Hello everybody and welcome to Triumph Reviews, back with a Hong Kong content review, continuing on with the romantic kind of supernatural movies and the collection, just going through some ones that I've picked up already for quite some time now, and continue on this theme. Next one up is Rouge, directed by Stanley Kwan, which was released in 1997. This is the Criterion edition, as you can see there. I'll just show you. Booklet artwork. This is actually getting an 88 film release next year, I believe, which is great. It's basically the same transfer, probably the same extras, more likely, but just released in a UK version. This was a US exclusive for Criterion, and 88 picked up the rights, basically just doing a transfer from this edition. And Rouge stars Anita as our main protagonist character, our main central character. We've also got Leslie Cheung, as mentioned within The Bride of the White Hair, doing a bit of a double bill. Leslie Cheung, extraordinary, dark, romantic kind of storylines and supernatural settings. Seems to be no stranger to these types of films, obviously doing the Chinese ghost story. And it's, as mentioned within that review, this actor's great. And Anita is also fantastic as well. And Anita is great. Has also been in the Heroic Trio and many other films, Drunken Master 2, for instance. Just a phenomenal actress that's been in quite a few projects, and just always a delight to see a new film with her in it, essentially, because I haven't seen all of her movies. This film is interesting. It's very different. Again, we're going in, it's not what I expected. I don't know how I feel ultimately. My opinion might change on this one. Not to say it's a bad film. I say actually it's a very, very good film, and I would absolutely recommend this one on the Criterion or the 88 film release coming out next year. Whether this film is a rewatchable film, whether this film is something I'm going to revisit again, I do not know at this point. I need to kind of think about this one. Where like The Bride with the White Hair was an instant yes, put back on the collection, absolutely watch that again. This one I need to kind of sit and think a bit more about, just how the narrative progresses, how it goes. The storyline for Rouge follows Anita and Leslie Cheung's character. Our central main protagonist, our main character in this film is Anita through and through. Absolutely, she is our guide for this entire movie. And basically the film follows a kind of doomed, kind of romantic kind of love story at the central heart of this film, set between past and present, the past being 1930s and the modern era being the 1980s, essentially. They committed suicide as a couple back in the past, and she's gone to hell, and she comes back on the anniversary of their suicide together on the 50th anniversary, in this particular case, on March 8th, 11 p.m. And there's this kind of message that was said beforehand, before they committed suicide. If they get separated, if something happens in their next life, find me, remember me on this date, on this time. And basically she turned up in hell and he wasn't there with her. And she's come back as a ghost during the mid-80s, and she kind of befriends and kind of follows and stalks this kind of newspaper kind of journalist, this kind of couple, and basically tells a story and basically wants to find what happened to him, because every time she waits, he doesn't come, he's not there, doesn't know what's happened. And then the film kind of jumps off from that point onwards, and this kind of comes into more of a dark kind of tragic kind of love story of the ages during the kind of the mid-30s. And from that point, we don't know what's happened. There's a kind of a dark kind of suicide that's happened, and we find out how that's taken place with opium and various kind of other drugs that go on during the time. But there's also small reveals that do happen, that do play into the kind of the late second act, definitely going into the third act. I don't want to reveal what those twists are. However, it does develop and does get very questionable. It does get much, much darker, even darker than I would say The Bride with the White Hair, and leaves it in a much more of a ouch, don't know how to feel about that kind of ending, which is why I said about I need to let this film process a little bit more. This film is questionable in terms of its kind of romantic and love angle, and it kind of puts that question to not just the film but also the audience: would you die for love? And one of the quotes in the film is that life is too precious, and it kind of, this kind of doomed romantic kind of story that's happened in the past kind of reflects on the modern day couple of the 80s during that time, and they kind of see themselves in those shoes and they ask those same questions. And would you commit suicide for a traumatic kind of love, essentially a love story, a kind of relationship, a longing that basically the wealthy family doesn't approve of and rejects. She is essentially a prostitute, someone who's, was in that kind of service in 16, and her life has always been that kind of way, being a service to men, essentially. And Leslie Cheung's character is a kind of wealthy kind of, member of the family. He owns 3 shops back in the day, and has a lot of money, has a lot of status, and he kind of falls in love with Anita Murray's character after kind of an encounter during the start of the film, kind of a nice kind of, flirtatious kind of encounter of down to music, and they both love each other and care for each other, and he's willing to kind of sacrifice his kind of status and his wealth to basically be with her. And this question comes into the play of, would you die for love? How far does love extend to your life and your position? And during kind of 1930s kind of Hong Kong and status and ranking, I can imagine the pressure of that being a lot more serious, and this idea of your past and your future being all entwined in one. And it's horrible, it's tragic. Anita Murray is absolutely fantastic in this film. She's very sad but also very collected. She definitely feels like a character from the 1930s, the way she stands, the way she kind of presents herself, the way she interacts. In terms of the kind of the more modern thinking kind of couple, she definitely holds her own in this film. I think she keeps a really strong character, really interesting character, that we get to explore and find out about within the flashback sequences and her modern view within modern day 80s kind of thing. It's not a commentary on how things have changed as much, but it's commentary about what love is and what we're willing to do for it, and how we can always be so busy and have work and have distractions and things going on. And it's just, how love can transcend between different times and how we view it and what we're willing to sacrifice and what it ultimately kind of achieves and what the end result is, if we give up on it or what we don't decide to do or not do. How does that reflect on our future choices and our, where we end up being kind of thing? I think that's quite important to the film, and I think it puts the challenges on you as the viewer, which makes it not a traditional love story. It's not one you're rooting for. It's not one you're going to go, oh my God, that was the best kind of thing. It's almost like a much darker, much more of a tragic kind of ghost with Patrick Swayze. That film has the darker element, but also has the cheese, also has the kind of more traditional Western, but also has the nice happy ending to it as well. This film is kind of the reverse opposite of that idea. Hits a little harder than I think some of the other films, being the fact that what's happened to these actors in real life, with Leslie Cheung committing suicide in real life. Obviously, many years later, that was really horrible and sad to hear when I kind of looked into him more, over the years, and being such a gifted, extraordinary actor, and him to take his life the way he did, and then Anita Murray having cancer as well. It's kind of like a very appropriate film to have these two actors at this time, at this moment, in the peak of their career during the mid-80s, giving some of the best performances in a story that's very reminiscent to what's happened to them, or a reflection of what's going to happen to them, almost like a premonition in a weird way in terms of how the film goes about. It plays it a little differently. The film comes across a very different performance, and the tone of the film and the feel of it, and the kind of the dark, somber nature of it ultimately. Great scoring, great visual style. I like the structure of the film. I like how it goes back and forth for an hour-and-a-half movie. It's very breezy. I think it's a very easy film to kind of get lost in terms of the story and how it unrails. Whether this is a film that you're going to revisit, whether this is something that you want to explore again, I think purely depends on your mood when you first watch it, and depending on if these performances and the story is something that you want to revisit. I don't know. I think it's definitely something for a further conversation maybe down the line, for sure. But Rouge is definitely one to check out for sure. Definitely a very important film in the terms of the kind of new wave of kind of Hong Kong movies that were coming out during the time, being the fact that this was leading up to those kind of more traditional, over-the-top kind of romantic kind of supernatural films. This one is very mature. It's very kind of hold back. It kind of tells it straight, and it definitely falls very nicely within the Bride of the White Hair, which is the film after that fact, after this kind of tiresome kind of genre, and kind of brings it back to a kind of a point and keeps it focused. So very appropriate films as it does kind of as a double bill. What are your thoughts ultimately on this director? What any other movies to check out? I haven't seen any of the films from this director. Is the one to check out after this? Please comment down below. So meantime, guys, Amphlett reviews. So yeah.